Hey everybody, it's Coach Matt over here at Primal Athlete Training Center in Cranston, Rhode Island. I wanted to do a special video today to all the wrestlers out there that are thinking about coming to Primal to train. Now, the three biggest groups of athletes that I train here at Primal are high school football players, high school track and field athletes, and high school wrestlers. Now, those three sports, there's no question why those athletes make up the largest portion of kids that I train here in the gym, and that's because strength and conditioning for those sports is extremely important. Now, wrestling season here in Rhode Island starts up in just a few days. Just about a week from today, they're going to be having their first practices, and about 2 weeks from today, they're going to be having their first tournament. So what I do during the off season is I go to a lot of wrestling clubs, I go to a lot of wrestling coaches and students at high schools and talk to them about the importance of conditioning and strength training when it comes to being a high school wrestler. Now, for as many athletes that come in here and work hard and train and dedicate their off season to getting stronger and to be getting in better shape to get ready for the season, I get just as many kids who email me and parents who call me to basically tell me that to argue, in fact, the case that when it comes to high school wrestling, conditioning and strength training really has little to do with it. And I'm always shocked by this, but the argument always states, and the argument always goes, I'll get an email from an athlete, or I'll get a message on Facebook or a comment underneath one of my posts that says, you know, I'm a high school wrestler. And they'll say, I have really good technique, I have really good form, and I beat people who are stronger than me all the time. So strength training doesn't matter. It's all about form and it's all about technique. And you know what? In some rights, I agree with that. If you're a high school senior, or if you're a high school junior, and you've been wrestling for 7 or 8 years since you were just a little kid, you know, 3rd, 4th grade, you've got 7 or 8 years under your belt, you've got really good form and really good technique, well then yeah, you're going to go up against somebody who's stronger than you and maybe only has, you know, 3 or 4 years of technique work or 3 or 4 years under their belt, and you're going to beat them. You have more experience, you have better form, and you have better technique, so you're going to beat that wrestler. Whether the wrestler's stronger than you, whether the wrestler's quicker than you, whether the wrestler has more endurance than you do, because you have better technique and because you have better form, you will beat them 9 times out of 10, guaranteed. And I'm not arguing that point. If you were to list the most important things about being a high school wrestler, form and technique is going to be at the top of that list. That's the most important thing for you. But right under that is going to be your athletic conditioning and your strength. And let me explain. When you are an experienced wrestler who has great technique and great form, you will be able to beat other athletes that don't have as good of technique and that don't have as good of form as you do, even if they are stronger than you, even if they are faster than you, even if they are more endurant than you are, you will still beat them. But what happens when you're not facing up against somebody at a dual meet who only has a few years of wrestling experience? What happens when you're at a larger regional tournament? Or what happens when you're at your state tournament? And now you're going up against athletes who have just as much experience as you, who have the same level of coaching that you've had through your life, and have the same amount of technique and just as good of technique and form as you do. Then what happens? Well, when technique is the same, when form is the same, when the level of coaching is the same, and the years of experience wrestling is the same, it comes down to your conditioning on the mat, and it comes down to your strength. That is what's going to give you the edge over your opponent on that mat. And we see it all the time. You see great, experienced wrestlers with great technique go up against other really good wrestlers with great form and great technique, and what wins out is their cardio, what wins out is their conditioning and their strength. That is going to be the limiting factor. That's going to be your deciding factor when you go up against somebody who is just as experienced as you and whose form is just as good as your form. And you have to realize that. Yeah, not being as strong as you can be, not being as conditioned as you should be, if you've got great experience, you know what? You're going to go up against some athletes in your state, and you're going to have a winning record, and you're going to do really well throughout the season. But when you get to those bigger events, when you get to those bigger tournaments, when you get to your state tournament, and you're going up against kids who are just as experienced as you and whose technique is just as good as yours is, well, guess what? That's going to be a stalemate. Your technique is just going to go back and forth. You're going to go into the later rounds, and if you're not conditioned to have good cardio into those later rounds, if you're not endurant enough in those later rounds, and if you don't have strength that carries into those later rounds, you will be beaten. It's a fact. I've seen it happen many, many times with many athletes. I've been involved in going to tournaments and working with wrestlers for a long, long time. And you see it all the time. When you get to the bigger events, when you get to the bigger tournaments, when the technique is the same, when the level of athlete is the same, when the experience is the same, those other factors come into play, like your conditioning, your endurance, and your strength. And if those three things are lacking when you get to those bigger tournaments, you are not going to do as well as you think. That's my argument. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for this. I'm going to get a lot of negative comments, but you have to think. If you're a really experienced wrestler and you're emailing me or you're texting me or you're calling me to tell me that I'm wrong, you have to think, have you ever been beaten? Recently, have you ever been beaten, and why were you beaten? If your form and your technique is that good, is as good as you say it is, more than likely you were beaten because the person was faster than you, the person had more endurance than you, and the person was stronger than you. Think about that. Guys, it's Coach Matt. If you're looking to take your strength, if you're looking to take your technique, and if you're looking to take your overall athletic abilities to the next level, you have to come in here to Primal to check this out. We're located at 101 Comstock Parkway, unit number 8 in Cranston, Rhode Island. Please give us a call. You can come in and try out a few workouts for free to see if it's right for you. All the information is going to be right at the end of this video.